Hi, I'm Dr. Bart. Thanks for spending a few minutes with us here today. Our topic for today is medical data. Now, this has become a huge field and had tremendous growth over the last few years. Who are some of the folks who are involved? Well, first of all, we've got HEOR, Health Economics and Outcomes Research folks, PMS, Post-Market Surveillance, we've got RWE, Real World Evidence, Real World Data, we've got medical researchers, physicians, payers, pharmaceutical companies, medical device companies, hospitals. This has become an absolutely huge field over the last few years, and it's extremely far-reaching. Now, these folks have a large array of jobs and functions, some of which might include assisting in actual collection of the data. In some cases, some of these folks might actually go out into the providers' offices to assist in data collection. Once data has been collected, some of these folks might assist in actually entering the data into databases or spreadsheets or some type of tool that we can use for analyzation. Then they might assist in actual analyzing and processing of the data. Another key function they might assist with is assembling materials that help convey the results of the analysis of the data. And a final function they might be involved is actually delivering the message of the materials and the analyzation out to the healthcare providers, payers, and other key stakeholders. So companies are relying more and more heavily on these key outcomes personnel to convey the message of the success and the efficacy of their products to key stakeholders in the marketplace. So let's take a minute and let's look at the landscape of this whole medical data arena. Today, more and more, both providers and payers are under all-time high pressure to be able to demonstrate the value and the quality of the treatments that we're performing. In today's complex data ecosystem, as we'll call it, it's both difficult and expensive to pool and gather all the information together that we need to prove safety and efficacy of the care that we're providing. And the pressures, stresses, and frustrations are just going to continue to grow as the payment models shift from traditional fee-for-service to new value-based care models. Now, these new payment models with value-based service are becoming more and more complex because they actually require tying cost, services, and outcomes data seamlessly. Now, we're all aware of the ever-increasing rises in costs of healthcare. An interesting study by the Center for Study of Drug Development recently stated that pharmaceutical companies on the average are reporting that to bring a drug through the entire R&D process, from inception to clinical studies to approval to actually launching the drug on the market, the average cost now is over $2.6 billion. $2.6 billion to bring a new drug or medical device to market. So there's extreme pressure on medical device and pharmaceutical companies to be able to prove safety, efficacy, and the value of the care, and that their products are truly providing best treatments. And to meet this increase in demand, a recent publication by PharmaForce International from earlier this year stated that pharmaceutical and medical device companies on the average have increased their field-based HEOR personnel by over 53% in 2016 alone. In 1 year, over 53% increase in the size of their force. So this medical data arena is proving to be far-reaching and a very high-impact field with considerable effect on cost, safety, efficacy, finances, reimbursement, and the overall effect it's having on healthcare delivery as a whole. So now that we've reviewed the landscape of this medical data arena, let's take a look at the actual methods or the variety of types of medical data collection that we have and a few of the challenges that each one of those present. So Giving a quick review, we looked at a number of the different methods of data collection and evaluation. We looked at claims-based and registries, and we determined that although giving us good information, they're limited to anything with an ICD or CPT code. And that really doesn't give us the granular layer that we would like to see. We talked about real-world data, registries. We talked about data warehouses and medical big data. And all of these are excellent to give us huge amounts of data, but the very fact that they're completely unstructured, no standardization, and so many variables that it becomes overwhelming. All of these factors make statistical evaluation and meaningful evaluation of the data that we pull very, very difficult to achieve. The last methods that we looked at, patient surveys and the electronic medical records, both of these provide excellent data again. We see that there's issues with standardization, unaccounted for variables, and unstructured data. So when we evaluate all of these methodologies, although all are very good and very promising, we see that there's kind of an underlying theme or kind of an underlying thread that we continue to see, which will be lack of structure, unaccounted for variables, and lack of standardization. All of these things make statistical evaluation and meaningful evaluation very difficult using those methodologies. So we'll be working on strategies to try to overcome these challenges for quite some time moving forward into the future. So we've talked a lot about the problems and the challenges, but it's never good to focus on problems in life. It's always much better to talk about solutions. So if we were going to build a system or a method of data collection that solved many of these problems, what would that system look like? Let's talk about that and evaluate that for a minute. So let's pose a few questions. What if there was a system where surveys were completed by the patients and clinical data was entered by healthcare providers actually at the provider's office? This would certainly eliminate the issue of participation and completeness. All data would be completed by, or surveys would be completed by patients. All data that was important and relevant would be entered by healthcare providers, so participation and completeness would no longer be an issue. And what if there was a system that utilized completely standardized, completely structured data with all variables accounted for? So then those variables could be either added or deleted to determine their effect on the overall data set and the outcome. This would certainly take a tremendous amount of pressure off of all of our study design team. In our existing systems today, if the study design team doesn't anticipate all the appropriate questions, then they just don't get answered. But having the ability to add and delete all variables at will would certainly take a tremendous amount of pressure off the study design teams. And what if this data was being collected real time and could be obtained and retrieved from any remote location across the entire country? This would certainly free up our outcomes personnel, so they would no longer have to actually go out on site to try to help us collect data, but instead we could redirect those folks conveying the results and the messages and showing best treatments to payers and key stakeholders. And finally, what if then the data that's retrieved from the system could be either obtained and analyzed by the company, so it would be raw data coming back for the company to analyze, or the system could even assist in analyzation and statistical evaluation of that data. So, does such a system exist? Starwriter assists HEOR and post-market surveillance teams, medical researchers, healthcare providers, pharmaceutical and medical device companies to obtain and statistically analyze structured clinical data using the Starwriter patented process. All this proves safety, efficacy, and advanced evidence and value-based medicine. After this video, you have the opportunity to schedule an appointment. Don't wait. you more details on exactly how Starwriter can assist you and your company. I'm Dr. Bart. Thanks for spending some time with us here today. And we'll talk soon.